Welcome to Seeds of Wisdom, team. Today we're wading into the thrilling world of international finance, Basel III to the gold standard. Don't worry, I promise to make it as painless as possible. We're talking about Basel III, stress tests, the gold standard, all terms that sound like they belong in a banker's drinking game but actually have real-world implications. Now you might be thinking, John, this sounds about as much fun as a root canal. And you know what? You might be right. But much like a root canal, it's important. Because the more we understand these systems, the better equipped we are to see through the fog of misinformation that tends to surround them. So buckle up, grab your financial dictionaries. You have one of those, right? And let's dive into the wild world of global finance. Let's start with Basel III. It sounds like a medieval treaty, and frankly, its implementation can feel just as drawn out. The goal? To prevent another financial meltdown like the one we all know and are still recovering from. Think of Basel III as a global set of rules for banks, kind of like a financial Geneva Convention, but instead of prohibiting chemical weapons, it's about things like capital requirements and liquidity coverage ratios, the riveting stuff that keeps you up at night. Now, there's been a lot of chatter, particularly in the darker corners of the internet, about October 1st, 2024, being some sort of apocalyptic deadline for Basel III compliance. And listen, I love a good doomsday scenario as much as the next anxiety-ridden millennial, but this just isn't it. The truth is, Basel III implementation is more of a rolling wave than a hard stop. Different countries and even different banks are at different stages of compliance. And here in the US, we have our own lovely set of regulations, including those delightful stress tests. These tests are designed to see if banks can handle a financial crisis without imploding like a poorly constructed Jenga tower. Important to note, these stress tests happen annually, not just because of Basel III. They're part of the Dodd-Frank Act, which, fun fact, is celebrating its 13th birthday this year. That's right, it's officially a teenager, which means it's probably going through a phase and rebelling against the very financial systems it was designed to regulate. Now, let's talk about everyone's favorite shiny metal gold, specifically the idea that we're about to return to the gold standard for trade settlement. Spoiler alert, we're not. At least not yet. Look, I get it. Gold has that whole tangible asset thing going for it. You can hold it in your hand, bite it to see if it's real, use it to make a very uncomfortable hat. It's the Ron Swanson of investments. But the reality is most international trade happens using boring old fiat currencies like the US dollar or the euro. We also have things like special drawing rights or SDRs, which sound like something out of Star Wars but are actually just another way for countries to settle debts. Now, there's been some buzz about the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, potentially creating a new gold-backed currency. And while that would be a pretty big deal, it's important to remember that, as of right now, it's just talk. The gold standard, for all its nostalgic appeal, has some serious drawbacks. It can limit economic growth, make it harder to manage inflation, and generally turn international trade into a logistical nightmare. So how do we separate fact from fiction in the often confusing world of global finance? Well, for starters, we need to be wary of those screaming headlines and YouTube comments sections that promise easy answers to complex problems. The truth is rarely that simple. When you see a claim about something like Basel III or the gold standard, take a moment to ask yourself, who's saying this? What's their agenda? And most importantly, where's the evidence? Don't just take someone's word for it, even if they sound really confident and have a fancy chart in the background. Check their sources. See if reputable organizations like central banks or international financial institutions are saying the same thing. And if something doesn't make sense, don't be afraid to ask questions. There's no shame in admitting you don't understand something. In fact, it's the first step to actually learning. And that, my friends, is your crash course in debunking financial myths. I know it wasn't as thrilling as watching paint dry, but hopefully it was at least mildly informative. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to understanding the systems that shape our world. So, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay skeptical. From all of us here at Seeds of Wisdom, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fact-based insights.